Science, Class 8, Chapter 12, Friction. In this chapter, we will learn about friction and its causes, factors affecting friction, types of friction, friction as a necessary evil, and methods of reducing friction. Friction is a force that opposes the motion of an object. Force of friction has the following characteristics. It acts between two surfaces which are in contact with each other. Hence, friction is a contact force. It always acts in a direction opposite to that of the applied force or opposite to the relative motion of the two surfaces. Now let's study about some examples related to friction. A ball rolling on a ground. When a ball rolls on a ground, it stops on its own after some distance. The force of friction acts between the surface of the ground and the surface of ball in motion. Hence, friction acts in the opposite direction of the ball, so the ball stops moving after a certain time. Second example is of pedaling of a bicycle. When you stop pedaling a cycle, it stops due to the friction between the wheels and the road. Friction is caused due to the interlocking of irregularities between two surfaces in contact. Surfaces of all objects have irregularities. Even a smooth surface has minute irregularities. When an object moves over another object, these irregularities get interlocked and oppose the motion of the object. This is known as the force of friction. To move one object over another, force needs to be applied to overcome this interlocking. Rough surfaces like sandpaper, mud, road have more irregularities and hence more friction. Smooth surfaces like glass, ice, oily surfaces have less irregularities and hence have less friction. Now let's discuss the factors affecting friction. The magnitude of friction between two surfaces depends upon the following factors. Nature of the two surfaces on contact, rough or smooth, force with which the two surfaces are pressed together. Rough surfaces have more irregularities and interlocking is very strong and hence more force is required to move the object over a rough surface. Smooth surfaces have less irregularities, interlocking is weaker and hence less force is required to move an object over a smooth surface. Friction also depends upon the force with which the two surfaces are pressed together. If the two surfaces are pressed harder, there is stronger overlapping and hence friction is greater. If the two surfaces are pressed lightly, then there is weaker overlapping and hence friction is lesser. Now let's learn about the different types of friction. There are three types of friction depending on how two surfaces interact with each other: static friction, sliding friction and rolling friction. Static friction is the friction exerted on an object at rest. Sliding friction is the friction exerted when an object slides over a surface. Rolling friction is the friction exerted when an object rolls over a surface. In static friction, strong overlocking of contact points is there. Interlocking is not very strong due to the sliding motion, and hence sliding friction is less than static friction. Interlocking is very weak due to fewer points of contact in case of rollers, and hence the rolling friction is even less than sliding friction. So we conclude that static friction is greater than sliding friction and sliding friction is greater than rolling friction. Friction acts around us all the time. Sometimes it is useful or even necessary, while sometimes it is a disadvantage. Friction helps us to hold things with our hands like a cup or a glass. The force of friction between the cup and the surface of our hand prevents the cup from slipping and provides the grip. If the cup is oily or greasy from outside, friction reduces and the cup can easily slip from our hand. Friction also helps us to stand, walk and run. The friction between the sole of our shoe and the surface of our ground prevents us from slipping. Next, friction also helps us to write. The friction between the tip of the pencil and the paper helps us to write as the lead of the pencil rubs off and sticks to the paper. Similarly, the teacher is able to write on the blackboard with a chalk. Friction causes the chalk particles to rub off, which stick to the blackboard. Friction is also important to anyone driving a car. Grooved tire threads allow space for water to be channeled away from the road tire contact point, allowing for more friction in wet conditions. Shoes are designed to increase the friction between soles and the ground. Unless a force is constantly applied, force will slow down all motion to stop eventually. It is impossible to completely get rid of friction, but it can be reduced. Now here are some ways to reduce the friction. The friction between a shaft, a long pole in the picture, and the outer part of a machine produces a lot of heat. Friction can be reduced by placing ball bearings between the shaft and the outer part. Other methods of reducing friction are using lubricants like powders or oil and grease, using rollers or wheels, using ball bearings. We sprinkle powder on a carom board to reduce friction. Oil or grease is applied between moving parts of machines to reduce friction. Wheels are used in vehicles to reduce friction. Ball bearings are used in ceiling fans, bicycles and vehicles to reduce friction. Ball bearings roll instead of sliding over the surface. Since rolling friction is less than sliding friction, use of ball bearings significantly reduces friction in machines. Now we come to the last part of our topic, fluid friction. Fluid friction is the force of friction exerted by liquids and gases on objects moving through them. In science, gases and liquids together are called fluids. Hence, the force of friction exerted by gases and liquids is called fluid friction or drag. Fluid friction or drag opposes the motion of an object moving through the liquid. There are a number of factors that affect fluid friction. Some of them are speed of the object with respect to the fluid. Higher the speed of the object, more is the fluid friction. Shape of the object. While moving at the same speed, more streamlined the object is, less is the fluid friction. Then we have size of the object. While moving at the same speed, larger the size of the object, more is the fluid friction. And last, the nature of the fluid. The higher the thickness or viscosity of fluid, more is the fluid friction. Like any other friction, fluid friction also has both its advantages and disadvantages. Birds flying in air have a streamlined body to reduce fluid friction. Similarly, fishes living in water also have a streamlined body to help reduce fluid friction. Some disadvantages are the speed of an object reduces as fluid friction also opposes the motion of an object. The energy of the object is lost in overcoming the friction of the fluid when moving through a fluid. This reduces their efficiency. Now, this is a concept map of the complete chapter in which a brief summary of what we have learned is shown. Thank you all for listening to me. You can go through the slides and the video again for better understanding.